let's move on to our next story, though.
What are we on next?
Okay, now we have what is actually happening in Iraq and Iran. You have been researching this while we've been doing the first segment, so let's talk about it.
Bear with me. Usually we have notes prepared.
But this is breaking.
This is unfolding as we go. There's currently a second attack happening right now. It's hard to keep my head on what I had planned for tonight and everything because it's got me a little flustered. I know people in the military. I know people who might be over there, and it's got me a little flustered. This is from The Guardian. They're reporting. The Department of Defense has confirmed at approximately 5:30 p.m. on January 7th, Iran launched more than a dozen ballistic missiles against the U.S. military and coalition forces in Iraq. It's clear that these missiles were launched from Iran and targeted at least 2 Iraqi military bases hosting U.S. military and coalition personnel at Al-Assad and Erbil. The assistants to the Secretary of Defense Public Affairs, Jonathan Hoffman, said that the U.S. is working on initial battle damage assessments. So that's what's going on. If you weren't in the military or, don't have somebody who's in your family in the military, you might not know about Al-Assad Air Base. It's not a small air base. It's one of the bigger air bases. It's not BIOP, but there's definitely people there. And it's really hard for me to deal with right now because this whole weekend I've been very agitated. I went to the protests.
That was your footage we showed.
Yeah, that was my footage on the show yesterday. I've seen it in the chat set already, and I want to kind of restate it. This is just me speaking and strictly me speaking. If anybody dies as a result of this attack, it is squarely on the president's hands. And the Qasem Soleimani assassination was just that. It was an assassination. We're going to roll into a story on that in a second, but that's just me. I'm not very happy right now.
It's, like I said, this is kind of sort of off topic, but it's kind of I feel this weird piece of commentary that, Hardlands Media is, very anti-war. We very much are like, hey, let's not do war. There's better ways to do it. Obviously, some people like the profiteering aspect of it. I was just realizing the amount of people that we have on the network who are veterans, and I'm really happy because it's not something we tried to do, but it's like the perspective you have is, and Kit and everyone else is, it's this is. Like I said, there's people out there. We don't know what's happening completely. Everything's just brand new. We have no idea really what's going on. Tomorrow we're going to have some better picture. Trump's going to probably tweet something out. There's going to be an escalation. But we're moving in a very, very predictable way.
I wanted to make another note. As of 15 minutes ago, the last thing I saw was there have been no deaths reported. That's good news. I hope. There might be a reason for that. When I was deployed, and I'm sure the practice has continued, when people died, it was a total blackout on any kind of comms that wasn't SIPR or NIPR. So basically, if you didn't have top secret security clearance, you weren't talking to the states. And the reason for that was to keep Private Joe Snuffy from going on Facebook and saying, yo, dog, we're going to miss you, before the proper authorities could notify the families of those killed. I'm sure that in hours we will have numbers, but names and things like that will be not forthcoming for at least a day. At least a day, you're not going to start getting real pictures of what happened because we got to give time to the proper authorities or the proper channels to deliver the message to the families. So more to follow.
I also want to just add that you're speaking for yourself, and I agree with you completely that anyone dies, it's Trump's fault. This is his doing. He assessed. This is my thing with Trump when he got elected was I was like, look, if he doesn't get us to war with Iran, he's not horrible in that sense. If we go to war with Iran, America's going to feel it. Iran's definitely going to feel it. And we're just going to give away our hegemony. Europe doesn't want to help us. One guy can't take down a nation, but if the foundation's already rotted, I feel like, it's like, not just on our show, but all the progressive shows out there, your Jimmy Doors, your Negro House, your everyone out there. I don't really want to name everyone because there's so many shows that have been calling this. We've been saying for years,
It's the fall of the Roman Empire.
this is the obvious outcome to obvious inputs, that this was always going to happen. Like with war in Iran, the day that they tore up the nuclear deal, I went through all the stages of grief, and I was like, okay. By the end of that day, I was telling random people we're going to war with Iran. Very strange faces looking back at me. But then at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, I'm prepared for this. I'm prepared for this to happen. And it's like they had just listened to us, because the news through MSNBC's out there been warmongering all the way through. Trump wasn't a good president until he launched cruise missiles. Then Brian Williams just his pants because he thought that was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in his life, besides lying about being shot in a helicopter or whatever he was doing or not doing. We live in a country, we live in an empire that's in its late stage of decline. And I like Sanders because I feel like he's the only person positioned to gently glide us to the ground. And Trump is crashing the plane a lot faster than I expected.
So I was discussing this the other day with my brother, because I talk politics with my family a lot, as you guys can tell. And so the question sort of came up, this is before the strike today, obviously. So the question is, will Iran retaliate? And I was saying it looks likely. I mean, the United States continues to take actions that sort of demand a response. And not only that, the outcry after the assassination of Soleimani in Tehran was one of, mass outcry, a lot of grief, and a lot of calling for some way to retaliate specifically against the United States of America, because Trump's actions are what incite, people know they're blaming Trump in Iran. They know that was the assassination that he ordered. And so in the context of there's this back and forth, there's a demonstrable overstep that the United States has done. The argument that my brother was making was basically saying, yeah, but America can wipe Iran off the map if it wants, right? America has the bigger stick. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. You can say, Iran's been preparing for this for decades, and they have, strong allies, and they have, a good defensive position and well thought out defensive strategies. But at the end of the day, America does have the world's largest, most powerful, most nimble military force. So America could do this. So that would be, maybe Iran won't do anything. And all I can think was, with that much public outcry, the government in Iran would lose legitimacy if it did nothing, right? They have to respond to the people's demand, right? And the people's demand is, hey, our most beloved military general, essentially the second in command for the country, was assassinated unjustly and illegally, and we know who did it. And we demand that our government do something in response. And so this is a kind of a logical next step for Iran, right? This is the type of military action that goes after the specific military assets that Iran does not like having close to its border, that Iran's allies, its recent allies, I guess, in Iraq don't want there either. So this is a good place where we can say, you shouldn't be here. We don't want you here. They don't want you here. You've been assassinating our military leaders. This is a good place to start, or to put this next conflict down. And given that we're not hearing a lot of reports of casualties yet, and the fact that I know it is a large military base, military airfield, and that there are a lot of there are a lot of personnel there. I have a sense that Iran may want to go after hardware, right, as much as possible. That's my guess, but we will have to see when that comes in.
So, I was watching both Fifth Column, one of his segments a day or two ago, and one of the things he touched on, which was what I was about to touch on, is just that. I'm sure those that are actually dealing in intelligence are aware of some of this. I'm not sure that the dimwits at the top, the people who retweet their passwords and actually shape our foreign policy.
Kofefe.
Kofefe. I'm not sure that they understand this. If Iran has the Keebs operating in Iraq, and they have the other Hezbollah that I don't remember the whole name of, the Libyan Hezbollah coming in and out and things like that. If they have this much access to Iraq that their general can roll around in the streets in a car, then they definitely have access to any advanced weaponry that we've left behind or handed over to the Iraqi National Army, which means if they have access to it, Iran has access to it, Russia has access to it, and they are, if they have not already, reverse engineering it, finding weak points, finding exploitations, finding things like that. Anything, much past an M4 with a good Picatinny rail is being picked apart and analyzed. And
probably they can make it for 100th what it costs us to make.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that too. But that's the thing is what you said about the hardware.
We make it expensive, but that's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, that's to your point. It's like we can spend $25,000 on a single-use shoulder-fire rocket, and Russia can probably make one for $500 or $1,000. And these people, it's like it's the idea that like, oh, America, we spend so much on our military, we're unstoppable. No, we're just bloated. We just spend $1,200 on coffee mugs. That's how we get to exactly where we are going. Mm-hmm. So it's, this is, I think a lot of people, to your point, John, I think a lot of people are going to be very surprised how much of a punch Iran has.
I mean, if we're going to talk about a ground war, things you got to understand is it's like, I'm pretty sure last time I checked, our tanks still outperform theirs. But I'm not worried about tanks. I'm worried about chemicals. That's what I'm worried about. When it comes to things like that, that's what you're going to see. If we were to actually do a ground invasion, it would be tons of troops, all you 82nd out there in Mob 4 for weeks, months, a long time. Worse than Iraq. It's going to be a mess.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Next story.
Real uplifting breaking news today.
Fun.
Yes.
The back and forth continues to escalate.
Yeah.